It is that time of the week. You're all very welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. I'm Anthony Murphy. This is Live Irish Myths for the next hour or hour and a half. We are going to be talking about genetics, DNA, myths, and all sorts of stuff. Pardon me while I make some minor adjustments. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the Mythical Ireland YouTube channel. Ring the bell so that you get notified of future live streams and video updates. Well, if you're on Facebook, you already know what you're doing. If you're here, please do feel free to comment and chat, ask questions, provoke conversation and debate. Always very welcome here on Live Irish Myths. Tonight we have episode number 231. We are stepping away for a week from our reading of Charles Squire, the Charles Squire book, Celtic Myth and Legend, Poetry and Romance. Well, partly to take a break from that, but partly because I was very intrigued by two different news pieces that have surfaced in the week since our last live stream on last Monday. Remember that these live streams are weekly events, usually at Monday at 8 p.m. Irish time. Sometimes that changes because I'm not available myself. If it changes, I'll give you the new date and time. That is usually 5 hours behind for New York, 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 noon Pacific. Of course, if you're in Europe or further east, it's later in the evening. So straight away, let's get to some of the commenters. Lots of people saying hello. We have 31 viewers already. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter says, whining, not bragging. It's hot today. 98F 37C feels like 109F 43C. Well, for once, Elaine, I am not jealous. And Elaine, of course, is in Texas, the Lone Star State. We had quite a pleasant day in the Boyne Valley. I was on tour with a lovely group of people from Cavan and Fermanagh. We visited the monastic site at Kells. If you're following the social media today, you may have seen a little quiz, a picture with the question Có Bhfuil Mé, which is Irish for where am I? Lots of you guessed Monaster Boyce. Some of you said Clonmacnoise. Some of you suggested other places. They were close in one respect, not geographically, but you were all wrong. In fact, it was the West or Ruined Cross in the monastery of Kells in County Meath. And the panel, some of you pointed out very, very accurately, the panel depicted the baptism of Jesus by John in the Jordan River. So remember that the Celtic or Irish Christian high crosses were apparently largely used as instructive pictorial aids to learning the various stories of the Bible. Anne Scott Doherty is here, and she is saying it was a beautiful day in Oregon. Well, we had a beautiful day, but we did have a couple of showers. Thankfully, not enough to drench us, and thankfully not enough to ruin our lovely day. From Kells, we went to Slane, where we surveyed the landscape on what was a beautiful summer day, spoke about St. Patrick's arrival and the bringing of Christianity there, but also, of course, about Sláinte, the Fir-Bolg king who gives his name to Slane. And from there, we went to lunch in Drogheda, just across the road from where I live, in the Thatch pub. Give them a plug. We had lovely food there, 50 of us eating at the one time. And then we went to Douth, where I gave a slightly shorter and truncated version of the Douth tour that I've been giving lately. And there'll be more of those coming, more about that and on. And then finally, we went to the Battle of the Boyne site at Oldbridge, which is just a couple of miles west of Drogheda here, Drogheda City. And I had a great time with that group. Lovely, lovely, lovely group of people. Lots of nice interactions. New friends made. Wayne Bird is in the house. Evening, Anthony. Evening, everyone. The myth and metal events and tours look great. Load of constellations to see with the naked eye now. Yes, and I will be speaking momentarily about the myth and metal and, of course, the tours. Wayne, always a pleasure to see you in the house or in the library. Joe Butler is in a sunny and gorgeous Colorado. Well, I am glad to hear it, because I know that Colorado is high up in altitude, and your winter tends to linger for a while. So when you get the summer, you celebrate even more. Susan Scott says, yay, hello all. So pleased to be able to join with you this afternoon/evening/morning, wherever you are. Yes, indeed. And we're delighted to have your company in the library, Susan, in the Mythical Ireland Library. Marcus, who is Irish technical thinker, says, Gia Tua Moore. Good evening to you, Sláinte. Rex Fortenberry is in Louisiana, ready for some gab and a good old yarn. Well, I Perhaps less mythology in this one, a little bit more science and genetics and archaeology. Hope you enjoy it. It's interesting. I think you'll find touches on subjects that we've been discussing here on the live streams over the last 3 years, and of course in some of my published books. Nick Eska Casterton is in the house. Hope everyone's good. All in good form here, Nick. Hope everyone in the Casterton household even is in good form. Barbara Murphy is in a very hot Tucson, Arizona. 10 minutes ago it was 103, which is 40 Celsius, heading towards 113, 45. Oh, no. There was an ad here years ago. I can't remember what it was for, but the line in the ad was, which I've often repeated, is climb in the icebox and shut the door. Absolutely. Yeah, you need to get the aircon switched on and stay indoors. Another reason I want to go back to Ireland. Yeah, it's a little bit more tolerable here, I think. Topped out at about 20, maybe 21 Celsius here today, starting off at about 16 this morning. Adina Sparks is in the house. Hope everyone's staying cool. It's 96 Fahrenheit in New Mexico and no breeze to help. Well, we have a bit of a breeze. I have the window open on this side and I have the door of the library open. I may have to close those at some point if there's noise. But at the moment, all I can hear is the chirping of the birds, so it should be fine. John Main is in the house. Banachty to all the two. I cannot stay too long, but we'll catch up tomorrow to what sounds like a really interesting Mythflix. One of my favourite subjects. I think you'll find it fascinating, John. And hope you're enjoying yourself out there in the Mediterranean. I'll take my dry heat to your humidity, says Barbara. Me too, says Elaine. Who else have we got? Adrian O'Beglin is in the house. Hello, Anthony Evan. Hello, Adrian. Falche. Mochara, August Conasata too. Desiree Riley's in the house with Amadeus. Happy to be here today and get to stay for the whole episode today. Yay, so jealous of the lucky people who got to go on the tour with you and Tom. Looked like such an adventure. We had a wonderful day. And as I said, more anon. Pardon me, because there's another one coming up. Archaeoastronomy Database has been tracking down the location of an enigmatic, unclassified Irish megalithic tomb. That sounds rather intriguing. Please do tell us more. Lynn Foley's in the house. Wishing I was enjoying the Irish weather. 102 Fahrenheit in El Paso, Texas. Wow, we have a lot of viewers in Texas lately, and they're all saying the same thing. It's all hot and warm and all the rest. Send a few degrees of it this way. We won't say no. Or just come and move to Ireland, you know. Rowan Grove is in Denver, where it's 91. Our first 90-plus day. Wow. Certainly hot down there. There you go. There's another Texan. Johnny Wilson is in Dallas, where it's 37 Celsius, which is a whole 4 degrees warmer than the hottest temperature ever recorded in Ireland. In modern times, of course. It may be that at some distant epoch of the past it was warmer here, but we'll never know that. Thank the gods for air conditioning, Barbara is saying to Adina. Yeah. Margaret Kelly is in New York City. I hope it's not too hot in New York City. Margaret, I wonder, are you in Manhattan or what part of New York you're in? Jeanette Nash is in California. I hope it's not too hot there as well. It usually is quite warm in California at this time of the year. Ali Gisel is in Tucson. Wow, you're all in the hot places. Enjoying staying inside and sipping on something cold while I listen along. Yeah, would that be whiskey? That's a joke. I had a very poor joke. Iced tea might be the order of the day. I got to do your tour and experience the Anthony on Fire while we make jokes. Making other visitors confused. Yes, some humor is included in my own tours. Sometimes it goes down like a lead balloon, it has to be said. But then that's dad jokes in general for you, isn't it? Alva Kelly, or is it Ailva? I'm not sure. Alva, I would say, but I know there's one lady I know who has that name who says Ailva. Banachty to the tour. Congratulations on going full-time, Anthony. Yeah, I know. Daunting, but exciting. Yes. And of course, with the support of the Mythical Ireland community, it'll be a success. Anne Busby is in Ontario in Canada. Now, that's a slightly more northerly location. Hopefully it's not too hot. Happy summer to you also. And of course, we are past summer solstice now, 5 days past, which means, as you know, that the sun begins its inevitable trek back down the horizon. The days eventually getting shorter, but not for a while. Summer's here for a while yet. Our weather has been magnificent lately, says Marcus, except for the odd thunderstorm. When we were doing Myth and Metal, a thunderstorm passed about 5 miles to the south of us, and it was just constant thunder, just constant rumbles and rumbles, hardly any lightning. So it was all obviously up in the clouds, intercloud lightning, but it was spectacular. Didn't spoil our fun either. And Tom, speak of the devil, or speak of the king. The Kinger is in the house. Tom King on Goa. Oh, I am delighted with the Myths and Metal day out. I thoroughly enjoyed the day along with my guests. Great day had by all. It's story time and working away. Yeah, it really was. It was brilliant. And as I say, more and on. Sharon O'Farrell is in house. And speaking of Myth and Metal, Sharon, I think if it's the same Sharon, I hope it is, and I'm not getting it wrong. Sharon was one of our guests at yesterday's wonderful gathering in the Forge of the Smooth Road, which of course is Tom's Forge in Bohermeen near Navan in County Meath. Hello, Anthony and all, says Patricia Pack from East Central Alabama. What's the temperature there, Patricia? It's hot everywhere else in the States by the looks of it. Very hot in some places. Hell's Kitchen, says Margaret, New York City, and it's raining today. Wow, well, I suppose we had some rain in recent days, which the farmers are very thankful for because it's been a bit parched here for a while. So the crops will not say no to a few drops of the old water falling from the sky. Joe Butler, Auntie Joe is in the house. Enjoyed the pics and videos from your Myth and Metal day. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yes, we had great fun being there. There's another of our guests. Noel Kelly, just in from starting a mythical mural this evening after an inspiring day yesterday at Myth and Metal. What a fantastic day. Brilliant stuff, Noel. A great pleasure to see you there. Noel was the first one out of the traps, by the way, the first one to buy a ticket for Myth and Metal. I just thought I'd throw that in. And Noel is based here in Drogheda, in the great city of Drogheda, here in the heart of the Boyne Valley, close to that wonderful place that we call Bóinne. Who else? Lots and lots of conversation even, which is brilliant. Peter Woods is Office Care 36 in Monaster Boyce. I believe you were in my backyard recently. No, I wasn't. I was actually in Kells, and some of the crosses there look very like the crosses in Monaster Boyce, which is why I kind of teased people with that question, Call Wilmay, where am I? I had one or two real expert responses, not just able to say you're in Kells, but they were able to say it's the West Cross. So they were able to say, for instance, Rob Vance commented earlier saying Kells, the joining of the streams Jor and Dan to create the River Jordan. And Robert Chappell, who's an archaeologist, a friend of mine, said you're at the baptism of Christ in the River Jordan, which is exactly what is portrayed in that panel. But that was the Western Cross, or the ruined cross at Kells, very like Monaster Boyce, and so easily confused. And the wonderful thing is that in the latest issue, it's in my van, or is it? Yeah, it's in the van. I should have brought it in for the live stream. In the latest issue of Archaeology Ireland magazine, there's a wonderful article in which they reckon they have tracked down the quarry from which the sandstone used in the crosses of Monaster Boyce was located. And that quarry is Carriglec, which is close to King's Court. Now, King's Court is in the county of Cavan, I think, but it's very close to the border of Meath. I'm not sure if Carriglec is in Cavan or Meath. I think it might be in Meath. Anyway, fascinating thing is they reckoned that, and one of the authors of the article is actually now deceased, George Sevastopoulos, I think is his name, a renowned geologist who worked, I think was one of the consulting authors of the book about Mouth, about tracing the origin of the curbstones of Mouth. But the fascinating thing is Carriglec is 22 kilometers from Monaster Boyce, so that's quite a haul, carrying huge slabs of sandstone across the landscape. But it is it is a slightly shorter distance from Carriglec to Kells, 20 kilometers, and they reckon that some of the crosses at Kells were made from the sandstone from the same quarry, Carriglec. So if you're not subscribed, highly recommend you subscribe to Archaeology Ireland magazine. It's a quarterly magazine packed every time with fascinating stuff about ancient and historic Ireland. Always a joy to read, always something fascinating to be learned. And I haven't failed yet to be enthralled by an issue of Archaeology Ireland. Evening from Chicago, says Eamon McDonough, who says it's overcast in Chicago. So some of the East Coast cities there having rain and cloud. But anyway, you probably won't complain too loudly if it's not too hot. Monica Regley is in Switzerland, where it's very hot. Good evening to you, Monica. Always a pleasure. And Monica and I have met on a couple of occasions here in Drogheda. Once upon a time, says Brendan, we followed the food source. Now we complain about dad jokes and saying hello to each other. We've come a long way. Hi, everyone. Yes, indeed. Yeah. That's part of the show. And at no extra cost. Dad jokes. Terrible dad jokes. Oswald Spengler is saying greetings once again, and still from the Oregonic Pacific Northwest. Anything to say rhesus negative blood types in relation to today's stuff? No, not immediately. And I do have to confess and put my hands up straight away and say I'm not much of an expert on genetics, DNA, genomics, all that stuff. I just lean on the experts and listen to what they have to say and basically summarize what they have to say. So I'm not sure just how deeply we'll be going into it. It's been a crazy few weeks for Desiree, but I'm always good when I'm here with you and the two. Well, that's delightful to hear. And hopefully, before too long, sorry, one of the buttons on my shirt is unbuttoned, out of view of the camera, thankfully. Desiree, hopefully, Coda will say hello at some point, and you'll get an immediate response on that side going, where's that coming from? Elizabeth Champagne is in sunny Vancouver in British Columbia in Canada. Good afternoon to you, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us on Live Irishmith. Sandra Boothroyd, evening just caught you. Woohoo! Brilliant stuff, Sandra. Welcome. Fáilte more. Sheila Gunn is in the house. Hello to her. Storms are over for now and the sun is shining. Brilliant. Delighted to hear it. Okay, that's me caught up with the comments. I have just a couple of things to say before we get talking about genetics and why genetics yet again is proving to be the science that is revealing so much about our past, in particular our prehistoric past. And as I was saying to some of my guests on the tour today of the Boyne Valley, some of the science is proving some of the mythology right even. Very bold thing for me to say, and no doubt I'd be castigated severely by one or two scholars, but I'm saying it nonetheless. That bit about incest in particular is very interesting. Lots of stories pertaining to Bóinne with incest in the theme. And we have that man buried in Newgrange 5,200 years ago whose parents were first-degree incestuous relations, brother and sister most likely. I wish I had your phone number. Was in Drogheda my last day with the author of your new book. Not to worry. Next time, Elaine. But listen, thank you very much. That was a beautiful gift, a very thoughtful gift. Sotonar is in the house. A very, very good evening to you, Trononowa. So, Myth and Metal, yes, was a tremendous success, if I may say so. We had a lovely day in wonderful company. What can I say? It was our first time running the event. First of many, hopefully. We had 34 attendees. We had good weather most of the time. The thunderstorm that came past kept its distance, didn't make life too difficult. We started the day with just a welcoming cup of tea or coffee and just a chat. And then Tom introduced everybody, welcomed them to the Forge. I gave a talk about mythology. One of the things I focused on, or two of the things I focused on, were the Fáhan Hill, which is exactly 2 kilometers as the crow flies from Tom's Forge. If you don't know Fáhan Hill in County Meath, Fáhan Hill is famed, reputed as the burial place of one of the most famous kings, high kings of Tara, and that is Niall of the 9 Hostages. A very quick, shall we say, a very shallow, not in-depth, not shallow, but a not in-depth, what word am I trying to think of? It'll come to me. A quick exploration of the alignment proved something very interesting. I suspect that Fáhan Hill and Mount of the Hostages on Tara are aligned on the solstices. Specifically, when you're at the Mount of the Hostages on Tara on the longest day of the year, the setting sun on summer solstice sets into Fáhan Hill. And when you're on Fáhan Hill, looking back towards Tara on the sunrise at the shortest day of the year, the rising sun comes up over the hill of Tara. But even more exciting than that was, not like that was exciting. But one of the exciting things was I read an archaeological report which was to do with Tara's hinterland, its geophysical and landscape survey by Gerard Dowling, the archaeologist. I'm not sure when that was published, 2015, I think. And I found in there reference to items that were being metal objects that were found in the vicinity of Tom's Forge. So, for instance, a spiral armlet or bracelet of possible 2nd century AD found beside a holy well in a townland between Faughan and Teltown. And then also prehistoric activity. Listen to this. Prehistoric activity, possibly involving ritual deposition, is also attested directly to the south of Faughan Hill at Bohermeen Bog. Now remember, Bohermeen is the townland in which Tom's Forge is located. The find location of a significant corpus of prehistoric objects, including 3 stone axes, a bronze rapier, a leaf-shaped sword and socketed axe head, and a Roman bronze ladle. And I know that at some point somebody had said, I'm not sure if it was on a live stream, it may have been, somebody had said to Tom that they had no doubt that he had been forging there for generations. In other words, that there's something in his genetics and in his ancestral memory that he's just repeating what had been done in the same location in the aeons past. And then I read this archaeological report saying, yes, indeed, various objects like that spiral armlet or bracelet. Wow, sure, doesn't he wear one himself, and he makes all this spiral stuff, and then the bronze material, and the archaeologists, without digging at Faughan Hill, looking at the enclosures circling that hill, are satisfied that it would probably belong to at the latest the Iron Age and possibly the Bronze Age, which means there's probably been human activity up in the direction of Tom's Forge for something like the last 4,000 years, maybe a little bit more. Amazing stuff, I think you'll agree. So yeah, Myth and Metal, just to say that this is an event that we hope to run regularly. That will, of course, depend on demand. The next Myth and Metal event is planned for Sunday, 23rd of July. You can get your tickets at the tours page of the Mythical Ireland website. I'm going to paste that in as a link now, and you'll see that's the second item on the tours page after the Newgrange Farm archaeological tour, which I will mention briefly also. So if you missed out on yesterday's event, and you saw all the pictures and you saw the video and you said to yourself, that's something I would really enjoy, get over to mythicalireland.com, go to the tours page and book your place if you're around and about on the 23rd of July. We were very glad to have welcomed visitors from as far as Belfast and Banbridge in Northern Ireland and as far south as Gorey in County Wexford. I knew it was Wexford, it's just the brain wasn't functioning there for a moment. We also had a gentleman who's now living in Meath, but from Inishmaan in the Aran Islands. And a really, really lovely day was had after my talk about the mythology and the monuments and the alignments of the area, including a chat about the Hill of Tara and Teltown. We then went on what was a lovely but also a very emotional tour of Durhamstown Auxiliary Workhouse, or what we call the Famine House, a place where starving people went during the famine to try and get some food, people who are desperate for something to eat. And Tom led us on a magnificent tour there and told us the whole history of that through the woods, across what was previously known as the Bridge of Death. I suppose we could now call it the Bridge of Life, which he had constructed, a lovely little wooden bridge over the gorge is hardly the word, over looks like a dried up stream bed. And it was just truly lovely, standing under the great elm trees and the lime trees and the horse chestnut, and hearing the bees buzzing around the flowers of the lime trees, I think it was, Tom. And just a lovely, lovely occasion. We went back to the forge then for the Bridget's banquet. Food was served. People ate, people made merry, people had lovely conversation, new friends were made. And then the afternoon was spent watching Tom making some items. He made a swan spiral pendant and he made one of his moon pendants, but had a significant input from the attendees. They were all invited anybody who wanted to could come up and help do a bit of forging at the anvil, which was brilliant to see. And then, if all of that wasn't enough, he sang us out with a few tunes played on the banjo, and with his remarkably wonderful singing voice. What a fantastic day out! So, as I said, the next event is the 23rd. The next Newgrange Farm Archaeological Park, and don't forget that includes a tour of the Chamber of Newgrange, is on the 4th of July. They're all on Tuesdays. That is the only date as of this time that the Newgrange Chamber is available to us, are on Tuesdays. So there are still some tickets available. We're going again on the 4th of July and the 18th of July, and also the 1st of August and the 15th of August. Now, the tickets for that can be obtained on the yourdaysout.com website. And again, I'm posting the link in there. The first tour, which was last Tuesday of last week, happened first, coincided with a magnificent day. There was a bit of thunder, but it stayed at a distance. And we had a fantastic time out on Newgrange Farm, where we heard all about the monumental landscape and, of course, the mythological landscape, and told some of the stories there. So that, I think, is us caught up with everything. So I better get on with talking about what I'm here to talk about, which is genetics, DNA, genomics, all that stuff. Just want to scroll back up because I know I've missed a few comments while I've been blathering. Brendan is saying hello to Tom. I said hello to Sotoner. Owen Martin is saying cursory. Yeah, there's nothing cursory with me. I always say I'll give a brief overview of something, and then I talk for half an hour. It looked like a great time was had by everyone. It certainly was, and the feedback has been tremendous. Most arranged lore always felt far more true than false, although there has, of course, perhaps been some poetic license taken with it, yeah. But it shouldn't be seen, I suppose, as an exact record of history either. But it's just there's so much in it that seems, true. Jade Pamela... Who's that? Jade Pamela Scott is in the house. Good evening to you. Anya Ryan, who was at Myth and Metal yesterday. Well done, Anthony and Tom. Thank you, Anya. Glad you were able to come with your friends. Glad you had a great day. We had a fantastic day. Delighted with how it went. Delighted to meet all those lovely people, including yourself. Gia Eve says, Josie Weatherford, I just got back from a weekend in Kerry, and it was so beautiful. I found Tubber na Gelt in Glen na Gelt from the Bulius Suvna story. Wonderful energy in the area. What does that word Gelt mean? Says you, why am I asking? Why don't I just look it up? Because I'm not a fluent Gaelgore, I don't immediately know the answer. So let's see. Gelt. Crazy person. Lunatic. Madhouse. Panic-stricken person. Naked fugitive. The well of the naked fugitive. Yes, the well of the lunatic. So presumably people went there if they had certain psychological issues, maybe, to get healed. I'm not sure. Jeanette Nash saying it's 59 degrees and cloudy. Well, that sounds quite comfortable. Yeah, and I know you're not complaining, but maybe I wouldn't complain, Margaret, I'm not sure where you are talking about. I hope security is better than it was in 2008. When I was last time there, I could dig and many artifacts with me, as there was plenty gaps in the ground, and you'd be able to see underground something. No CCTV. Where are we talking about, Margaret? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Remember that in Ireland it is illegal to carry out any sort of an archaeological digging without a license. It's also illegal to use metal detectors to look for archaeological remnants, tools and bits and pieces. Like a spiritual nexus for metalworking, says Desiree. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Tom Lawler is in the house. Well done. Lovely to see the photos and videos. The Devil's Bit, County Tipperary. That is the bit that the devil allegedly bit out of the mountain and spat it out. And what he spat out became the Rock of Cashel. That's the story, anyway. Maureen Joyce is praising Tom's talent. Of course, yes, he's brilliant. He's great with people too. Kibblehenge is in the house. Hello, Kibblehenge, all the way from Dronehenge here in Bóinne in the Boyne Valley. Brendan is feeling a bit green at the moment. Sounds wonderful. Yes. Josie loved the weather for the weather. The weather for Josie loved the weather in Kerry. The constant changes keeps things interesting. That is Ireland. 40 shades of green. Thank you, Owen. The pennies just after dropping. That was the word I was looking for ages ago, and I never made the connection between a cursory glance. Yes. Thank you. And yes, I feel like an idiot. But look, that's live TV. This is the sort of stuff that happens on Live Irish Myths. Kyle M is saying hello from an overcast and thundery New York. Wow, sounds a bit similar to Ireland because we've had lots of thunderstorms over the last week. Anyway, I'm going to get going. So 2 things tonight, 2 headlines that have grabbed my attention over the past week or so. Actually, it may have been a bit more than a week. I had intended to do a live stream on this sometime last week, but I said, you know what, hold on to this, and this will make a good Live Irish Myths episode. So the 2 headlines were as follows. Ancient DNA points to Irish language's 4,500-year-old roots. And the other headline, that was from irishnews.com, Northern Ireland News in particular. The other one was from the Guardian website. And the headline was, Ancient Britons built Stonehenge, then vanished. Is science closing in on their killers? Now, I know you're going to say, Stonehenge, what's that got to do with Ireland? And I'm going to immediately say to you that we are talking about the Neolithic era, in which the great monuments, Neolithic monuments of Britain and the great Neolithic monuments of Ireland were not just built by people who kind of knew each other, but I would say that some of them were built by the same people, that some of the same people worked on the building of some of the monuments at Bóinne, as had done in the Stonehenge landscape. And we are talking about the same people who had migrated westwards from Anatolia. I don't know which one to start with. Will I start with the ancient DNA points to Irish languages, 4,500-year-old roots, or will I talk about the Neolithic people and what happened? So this, like, you could literally change that headline from Ancient Britons built Stonehenge, then vanished. You could say Ancient Irish people built Newgrange, then vanished, right? You could say the same thing. I might start with the language one. Now, the reason these are interesting, first of all, is because this is relatively new research. It's not necessarily all new, because we have previously had discussion on some of the live streams in relation to particularly the Irish language one. And you'll remember in 2020, when that famous paper was published about NG10, the man who had been buried in the chamber of Newgrange 5,200 years ago, whose petrous temporal bones, those parts of his skull that had survived and been excavated during the archaeological digging at Newgrange in the 1960s, well, those bones had been kept in a box, I think in the National Museum, and in recent years, in the last few years, have been subject to genomic testing. And they had found that his parentage was very interesting. His parents were probably brother and sister. But there were other things in that paper. And one of the things was the challenge to this paradigm, this long-held and long-cherished belief that the Irish language had arrived in Ireland with the Celts in the Iron Age period. Now, why is it that geneticists are arguing that the Irish language has been here longer? How is it that it's geneticists who are telling us the Irish language has probably been here longer, and not linguists and scholars in, medieval studies and all of that sort of stuff? Well, this is very interesting. Now, the article in question pertains to a friend of Mythical Ireland who has appeared on one of our conversation episodes. You may remember that in addition to the in 2020, the Live Irish Myths live streams were daily, and then eventually in August of that year we went weekly, and we've been going weekly ever since. But you may remember then, in conjunction with that, we did 11 or 12 at least. Sounds very Irish, doesn't it? We did conversation episodes. Episode number 4 of Live Irish Myths in Conversation was with Professor J.P. Mallory, Professor Jim Mallory, Emeritus Professor of Queen's University, an archaeologist, linguist, and author. And we had the pleasure I had the pleasure of a long conversation with Professor Mallory, and we did that on Zoom, meaning that you could all participate. I hope you enjoyed that. So this is something that was pertains to the work that Professor Mallory has been doing. I'll read a bit of it, and maybe that will provoke some conversation and questions and discussion. At the start of the week of summer solstice, this was published on the 18th of June, so that's 8 days ago. Many will once again marvel at the magnificent structures built across Ireland thousands of years ago, including Newgrange in County Meath. Well, of course, probably our most famous Stone Age monument, certainly up there with Poulnabrone Dolmen and maybe a few others, Queen Maeve's Cairn. But I think Newgrange is the most famous and probably the most visited and the most commented about. The structures were built by the descendants of the first people that landed on the island in what is believed to be two migratory waves from around 10,000 years ago. So this is interesting because what Mallory is immediately saying, well, actually, John Breslin, who's the author, let us not put words into Professor Mallory's mouth. We may actually get an opportunity to bring him on again and to discuss all this with him. Actually, I think that would be the ideal thing to do. So the structures were built by the descendants of the first people who had arrived in two migratory waves from around 10,000 years ago. And remember that the reason there was pretty much nobody living in Ireland just before 10,000 years ago is because of the Ice Age and its drastic effects, with ice covering much of Ireland, and in some cases the ice sheets were a kilometre deep. Not the sort of environment you would imagine that humans would survive in too well. Until recently, it was argued that much of the population of Ireland was descended from this group of people, mainly from what is now Spain and southern France, with the arrival of the Celts around 500 BC, adding what became the dominant language and culture of the Irish. This is still a widely believed narrative, which is just what I've been saying. And I'm always saying with these things, when I'm reading something, rather than commenting, I should just read, because generally what I comment is then what's revealed in the article. Michael Sheehan loves this topic. Thank you for keeping us up to date, Anthony. My pleasure, Michael, and welcome to the live stream. I'm fascinated by all this. And, despite all that has been, in terms of all that's been published about prehistoric Ireland, there is still so much to be learned. And it continues to be absolutely riveting and fascinating. Advances in the study of ancient DNA have almost entirely changed that traditional thinking. It has been nothing short of a revolution in archaeology, says Professor Emeritus Jim Mallory, one of Ireland's foremost experts in the field. So listen to what they're saying here. They're saying the study of ancient DNA has been nothing short of a revolution in archaeology. So the science of genetics informing the science of archaeology. And I've been saying on my tours to Fornox and Douth and other places that, in fact, genetics is the science that has revealed more about prehistoric Ireland than archaeology has in the past decade. And that's not a slant on archaeologists. It's got nothing to do with the fact that archaeologists are a brilliant bunch of detectives, a brilliant bunch of forensic investigators, very talented and very well educated. It's just got more to do with the fact that genetics happens to be a breakthrough science at the moment. And of course, the more that we look, the more that we're able to sequence the genes, as it were, the genomic makeup of ancient people, the more we're able to build a picture of who they were related to in particular and where they might have come from. Professor Mallory of Queen's University and author of The Origins of the Irish has brought together more recent evidence, most notably from DNA analysis, in his latest paper, From the Step to Ireland, the Impact of aDNA Research. And I have to admit, to my detriment, I suppose, that I have not yet acquired a copy of that paper. As soon as I am able to, you can be guaranteed I will digest it from top to bottom and probably eat the paper when I'm finished, just for good measure. In short, the vast majority of the Irish are descended from the waves of migration that fanned out across Europe out of an area north of the Black and Caspian Seas from around 5,500 years ago. Now, I know I'm probably foreshadowing or going to repeat what will be in the article, but there are two distinct waves that we talk about. One is the migratory wave that emerged out of that region of Turkey that we call in modern times Anatolia, which was the beginning of the Neolithic revolution, starting there sometime around 10,000 years ago or so. And those people brought farming across Europe as they migrated westwards, eventually reaching the coasts, eventually reaching France, where, by the way, we have the closest cognates to the Bóinne monuments on the northwest coast of France, and probably put to sea. And according to our good friend Bob Quinn, the Atlantean Irish, Bob says that the natural currents of the Bay of Biscay would sweep if you didn't have a sail on your vessel, would sweep your boat up around underneath Ireland and into the west, into the Atlantic on the west coast of Ireland. But here we are talking about a different migration, which is a slightly later one. Now, I know it says 5,500. That's when the migration started. The Neolithic farming community that eventually went on to build the likes of Pulnabrone, Carrowkeel, Loughcrew, and Bóinne, they arrived in Ireland circa 4,000 BC, sometime around 6,000 years ago. But the migration that we're talking about here is a different one. We're talking about the migration from the Pontic Steppe, that area north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They were a different people, a genetically diverse people, diverse as in diverse from the population that had migrated out of Anatolia. What was the difference? Well, I think the main difference is in the skin tones. The people who built Newgrange, for instance, were said to have an olive skin, a slightly darker skin. They were shorter, and I believe they were blue-eyed. The Pontic Steppe migrants, who, by the way, arrived into Ireland as the Beaker people in the early Bronze Age, they were taller and fairer skinned and fairer haired, apparently. So genetically diverse. And we've said this on many occasions in the live streams. The people who built Newgrange, that Neolithic population largely disappears from view, and the modern Irish population is largely descended from the people who replaced them. And the big question is, how did that replacement happen? That's the second article that I'm going to be reading. So have I got it? Is everybody clear? So the Neolithic people who built Newgrange, they came from Anatolia in Turkey. They brought farming across Europe and into Ireland, but they largely died out. And a later arrival at the end of the Neolithic, the beginning of the Bronze Age, is the Beaker culture, so called after their distinctive beaker-shaped pottery, and of course the bronze objects that they brought metallurgy to Ireland. So they largely replaced the people who were here, and they are the people from whom the Irish. It's a funny thing. Not a funny thing, but it's complicated. It can't be simplified by saying the modern population of Ireland is descended from the Beaker people, by and large. But you have the issue of, and I spoke to a gentleman on a tour today who was talking about, he was a genealogist and also had done some genetic studies. And, if any Irish person was to get their DNA test done, they would find that they may have Scandinavian DNA. They may find they have some British. They may find they have some European. We have seen arrivals of people over time, not just mythologically. I'm talking about historically and factually, which tends to add, as it were, to the gene pool. There's no such thing as a pure Irish ancestor. We didn't just spring up like Adam and Eve out of some mystical garden in Ireland. Everybody, as I say, everybody who is alive in Ireland today are descended from, unless you arrived in the past during this lifetime, everybody who's alive in Ireland today is descended from somebody who arrived here in the past. And probably arrived here by boat, because there was no land bridge connecting Ireland with Britain at the end of the Ice Age. something else that Jim Mallory argues about in his book, Origins of the Irish. So if you want more on this subject, that book is highly recommended. Do not get the first edition. Jim Mallory has said himself that between the first edition and the revised edition, he had to change the whole chapter about genetics because so much new information had come to light. So I have the original hardback first edition. So get the paperback, the later edition. But Mallory, whose main expertise over his more than 40 years in Queen's is in linguistic archaeology, suggests what became the Irish language dates back also to when those people coming from the the Beaker Bell culture, he calls it, began to arrive on our shores around 4,500 years ago. So he's saying that the Irish language dates back to then. Remember what John Breslin said in his article a few paragraphs previously, that the notion that the Irish language arrived with the Celts around 500 BC in the Iron Age is still a widely believed narrative. So what Mallory is saying is challenging the paradigm or the widely held belief. No doubt it is meeting resistance and will probably continue to meet resistance. However, I think it is fascinating partly because, oh my God, how do I disentangle this without going off on all sorts of different pathways or down different rabbit holes? And I know that you have previously told me you like rabbit holes. But I have said, and I've written, and I spoke about this on the podcast, the live podcast interview with Blind Boy here in Drogheda a couple of months ago, that there are myths about Bóinne. There's myths about Newgrange that seem to, in sort of decorative or what you might call allegorical language, which appear to describe the sun shining into Newgrange when the sun is standing still. Nobody in the Middle Ages writing a myth down could have known that the sun shone into Newgrange. It hadn't done for several thousand years. And I've said this repeatedly for years and years and years, I have said that some of the myths seem to contain information that could only have been known by either the original people who had designed those monuments and built them and lived in that landscape, or a people perhaps who were in contact with them who came afterwards, like the Bell Beaker people. The ADNA revolution has had such major repercussions. Mallory, in his paper, surveyed the, quote, history of research in support of the hypothesis that the Irish language ultimately owed its origins to a migration emanating from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. Now, my understanding is, and let me just do a quick Google search just to confirm this. My understanding is that the Pontic steppe was a large area of mainly grazing land, like a huge area of grasslands. So this is Wikipedia, which I don't like using as a source. Is the steppe land stretching from the northern shores of the Black Sea, Pontus Euxinus of antiquity, to the northern area around the Caspian Sea, and covering, what was the area? There was a good summary there. The area is around 994,000 square kilometers, which is almost 1 million square kilometers, or 384,000 square miles. Fascinating stuff. And of course, if you Google that Pontic steppe and you click on maps or images, you'll see all sorts of depictions of it. But that will give you an idea of where we originated. And funnily enough, part of that Pontic steppe coincides with what is now parts of southern Russia and Ukraine. Wow, incredible stuff. The Beaker culture, named after their inverted bell drinking vessel, was dominant across large parts of Europe around 3,500 years ago. And there is an image of one of the Bell Beaker cups. So this article, I will provide the link for you, so you can go and read it yourself and support, I suppose, the the Irish News website, irishnews.com. But the previous lack of physical archaeological evidence, including burials, led many experts in the past to believe they made little impact on Ireland. Then came the large-scale mapping through the male line of genetic markers. Sorry, I'm just doing some highlighting here as we're going along. And there's lots of comments. I will try and catch up on those. I will do my best to catch up on those and maybe have some further discussion. The R1b haplotype is dominant across Western Europe, but the numbers are stratospheric when it comes to Ireland, Wales, and large parts of Scotland. Stratospheric, so huge numbers of this R1b haplotype. Around 84% of the male population on the island, he's talking about Ireland, and 95% in Donegal have the marker. That's the county of Donegal in the far northwest of Ireland. Sorry, I read that wrong. Let me read that again. I missed out a word. Around 84% of the male population on the island and 95% in Donegal have this R1b haplotype marker. Arguably more important, there is also a submarker linked back to a specific area north of Black and Caspian Seas. Wow. I'm highlighting pretty much half the article here. So why am I highlighting anything? It's like the whole thing has to be highlighted, you know? A smaller percentage are believed to retain the DNA of the earlier settlers, the builders of Newgrange, whom archaeological evidence suggests were much darker skinned than the later arrival. So a smaller percentage are believed to retain the DNA of the Neolithic builders, which is fascinating. There are still people living in Ireland who are directly descended from the people who built Newgrange, but they are few and far between because by and large, as we've been seeing, we're descended from the later arrival. Fascinating. Wouldn't it be wonderful if some of us, had a DNA test done and found that we had similar DNA to some of the people of the Neolithic? A landmark study published in 2015 on the genetic breakdown of the bodies of 3 men found on Rathlin Island added to the growing consensus on the origins of most Irish. And of course, Rathlin Island is located off the north coast of Ireland, off the coast of Antrim, isn't it, I think? The 3 Bronze Age individuals from 2026 to 1534 BC showed substantial steppe genetic heritage. And so those dates, just to put it in context, are largely early Bronze Age. So there's an early Bronze Age and a later Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age lasts approximately from 2500 BC to around about 600-700 BC, when we have the horizon with the Iron Age. And my understanding of it is, if there's anybody who's studied archaeology who wants to correct me, please do. My understanding of it is that in the early Bronze Age, the great distinction between the early Bronze Age and the late Bronze Age is that in the early Bronze Age, humans in Ireland used metal, and in the late Bronze Age, they relied on metal. So they used it, but weren't reliant upon it in the first part of the Bronze Age. There may be other things that qualify what makes something, I mean, apart from the dates, what makes something early and what makes something late Bronze Age. Mallory suggests the relative lack of Beaker-type objects in Ireland was due to those living here developing their own distinct culture, picking and choosing from the Beaker neighbours in what became Britain. Further, there was an, quote, overwhelming predominance of cremation burial, unquote. The evidence was burned. And of course, as we've previously said here, and we have done episodes on DNA. Don't forget, we did a couple of episodes about those great findings at Newgrange in 2020. Well, one of the things about cremation is that it, by and large, destroys destroys DNA, and destroys with it the chances of finding out someone's genetic heritage, unfortunately. While there is almost indisputable genetic evidence, the majority of modern Irish are directly descended from the Beaker arrivals. There is still much debate over the language. So let's just read that again. While there is almost indisputable genetic evidence that the majority of modern Irish people are directly descended from the Beaker arrivals, there is still much debate over the language. So in other words, we've now reached a point where the science and the scientists are confident in the data, And what they're saying is, yep, by and large, the modern Irish are descended from the Beaker Bronze Age people. But the question of language is a much more diaphanous one. It's much more difficult to get to grips with. Why? Well, a big part of the reason for that is the first writing in Ireland is with the arrival of Christianity and the monks. You know, our entire linguistic, mythological, folkloric, oral culture is exactly that. It's oral for probably thousands of years until the arrival of the monks. And only then do we see the writing down of some of this material, mostly in the Middle Ages. Ireland is today arguably the most dominant Irish is today arguably the most dominant of what is now described as the Celtic languages, one of several in Central and Western Europe, derived from Indo-European. The Celts on mainland Europe and a language were first identified by Greek writers around 600 BCE, before Common Era, or 600 BC in old-fashioned speak, before Christ, if you're adhering to the old timelines. The name Celt derives from the Greek word for foreigner, it is suggested. Fascinating stuff. But the genetic evidence says Ireland was settled by a peoples nearly 2,000 years before that, and that there was no large-scale invasion or migration before the Vikings. In other words, this idea that the language came with the Celts in the Iron Age is disputed by DNA evidence, which shows that there was, in fact, no large-scale arrivals. I'm going to highlight that. There was no large-scale invasion or migration before the Vikings since the Bell Beaker people arrived here around 2500 BC, around 4,500 years ago. Quote, if so, many linguists will be forced to reconsider a model of Irish origins that they had presumed was linguistically implausible, unquote, says Mallory. The only other plausible explanation is that there was a more recent source of the Irish language in the later Bronze Age or Iron Age. This would force linguists to, quote, consider the mechanics and evidence of how one Indo-European language so thoroughly replaced a presumably earlier Indo-European Beaker language in Ireland. In short, says Mallory, it seems that the geneticists have gifted not only archaeologists, but also linguists with the opportunity of living in interesting times, which many of you will know is a Chinese blessing, which is also a curse. May you live in interesting times is not always a beneficent a blessing or a wish upon someone. Interesting times can be times of change and times of hardship as well. But J.P. Mallory certainly putting the cat amongst the pigeons on this one, because at the end of the day, like every good scientist, he's following the evidence, and the evidence is pointing in a particular direction. And the evidence is arguing a long-held and cherished belief, which is that the Irish language arrived in the Iron Age. Sorry, folks, I'm with Mallory on this one. I don't know how you feel about all this. It makes perfect sense to me reading it. Now, let me scroll back through the comments, because I have missed a ton of comments. Let me just quickly find out who's saying what. Now, Brendan Byrne says, I bet we sent over our builders to build Stonehenge. Irish builders are still over there building roads. Glad this is finally coming to light, says Sotonar. I've been arguing that the whole Iron Age narrative is a farce since I was a child. Wow. On what basis, Sotonar? I mean, I would have gone with the paradigm, as it were, on the basis that that's what the experts were saying, you know. Now we have, I suppose, more evidence. Bev Davis is saying, my specialty is horses. I've always said that the Celts introduced the first domestic horses to Europe. Now these geneticists are trying to remove the Irish from the... No. That's not what's happening. Bev, you'll find, in fact, that it has been said before that horses were introduced to Ireland in the Neolithic, not by the Celts. That's my understanding of it. Now, I could be mistaken. They're not trying to remove the Irish from the Celtic Indo-European family. All they're saying is they're moving the timelines back. They're saying that the Irish language came much earlier than it has been suggested that it came. Yeah. Also, I believe, well, that's exactly what Mallory is saying, Sotonar. The genetics shows no large-scale migration, wave / invasion during the Iron Age. Correct. But it does show one in the early Bronze Age. Absolutely. That's exactly what Mallory's argument is. Michael loves this topic. Oh, okay, we said that already. Apologies. I'd love to have Professor Mallory back, says Alwyn Roy Badzek. I'm not sure if I said hello to you earlier, Alwyn. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, I think I will ask him to come back on. In fact, now that the pandemic's over, I could bring the cameras to him. Watch this space. Brendan is saying, I think I will get a DNA test to see who the Byrne clan hung around with. I always say, be very careful with getting your DNA tests done. You don't know who's in your past. You don't know who you might be related to. It's better to be blissfully ignorant and just to think, that my descendants were high kings of Tara. You may find out you're related to all sorts of strange and murderous people, as has happened on that program. What's it called? Who Do You Think You Are? I think it was called, an Irish TV program, which took celebrities and did DNA tests and traced their lineage and found all sorts of horror stories in there. Sean Patter saying hello from a cloudy South Sligo. I'm a bit late tuning in this week. Not to worry, Sean. And don't forget, to Sean and to everyone else who's either late coming in or who's not able to watch this live, of course, it will be available to watch back as soon as it's finished. Mavanwe says, oh, very late. Apologies. I'm listening in while finishing off work. Well, come here. That's perfectly okay, Mavanwe. Thank you for joining us. You're always very welcome. The full Irish, that's Gary, is in South Dublin. It makes me laugh when I hear folks say, this is my island. And Anto, we all know the dog that built the brew. Well, that's true. I'm not disputing that at all. Yes. This whole idea of the Irish being some sort of pure race, as if we sprung up mystically and magically from an Irish Garden of Eden, as I say, it's a funny one. Bev says, good. Irish Technical Thinker says, interesting. Wasn't the Western hunter-gatherers from the Mesolithic blue-eyed and the Neolithic brown-eyed, but some Neolithic elite blue-eyed, possibly Neolithic? I'm not entirely sure about that, Sean. I'm not. So I'm not going to argue or suggest one or other of us is wrong. I'm not entirely sure about that. I know that there were people in Ireland 33, 34, 35,000 years ago who were dark-skinned. The land bridge contested, yes, it is, but don't forget that the evidence for the land bridge doesn't just come from geology and from archaeology. It comes from the flora and fauna of Ireland. You see animals and plants in Britain that are common to the continent, but you don't see them in Ireland. So it's a bit more complex than that. And we did have a discussion about that when we read a section of, what was it, Robert Lloyd Prager's The Way That I Went, and we had a bit of a discussion. Wasn't exhaustive, in fairness, and I'd be happy again to have an expert on a conversation episode to talk about that land bridge, ice bridge idea. I know that Mallory contests it. Mallory says that the evidence weighs in favour of there not having been a land bridge at the end of the Ice Age. Myths, says Brendan, always remind me of the saying, no smoke without fire. That's very true. Scythians were on the Pontic's step, says Desiree. Yes, indeed. And there's mention of Scythia in some of the invasion mythology. Again, I'd have to go back over it. Who Godarn says, Brill. Helena Breen is in the house. Evening, Anthony Murphy, and all the Tua. Thank you, Helena, and you're very welcome. Paul Goran is in the house also. I was just formulating that very question. I have had my DNA done, and I'm 78% Irish, but which strain of Irish is that? Yes, and the question, of course, would be, what is the other 22%? Catherine Cooney is saying, hello, Anthony and Tua from the Adirondack mountain foothills, New York. Wicked thunderstorms marching through today. Be well all. And the same right back at you. Good afternoon to you, Catherine. Thank you for joining us on Live Irish Myths. A cup of tea for a most interesting discussion. We're only halfway through. I have yet to begin the article about the Neolithic people and what made them disappear. Stay tuned. This is another exciting one. So they used bronze tools to carve those beautiful shapes in rocks. No, I don't think that's what they're saying. The megalithic art is Stone Age. I'm not sure, Marcus, if you're getting So they use bronze tools to carve those beautiful shapes and rocks. That's testament to dedicated skill and being a nerd of the time, especially since these people were like our version of nerds. I suspect if you go back in time, you probably find there are lots of really interesting nerd-like people. Have you read The Celts from the West by Barry Cunliffe? Yes, I have indeed. But I must confess that I must read it again and, in fact, go back to it. Did they bring horses? The henge you found reminds me of an area for breaking horses. One of the traditions of the Éineach sites, the assembly sites of Ireland, was that they were used for horse races. That's one of the traditions, you know. Kathleen Gallagher is late also, but thoroughly enjoying. Brilliant stuff, Kathleen. Welcome. Good afternoon to you. Sotonar is largely working on intuition. Well, if so, you have an amazing intuition, you know. And well done on that. Aldo Jordan says, don't forget the butchered animal bone. Yes. That comes up. Found in a County Cork cave. Paleolithic DNA dated to be 33,000 years ago. The butchered animal bone, which is a bear bone, is during the Ice Age, isn't it? And indicates that humans were cutting bear meat in a cave, possibly during the Ice Age. Maybe they were isolated survivors, you know. Michael says, you may find out that you may not be descended from whom you do know. The milkman. Oh, I've had so many interesting conversations with people about families finding out dark secrets. Gentleman told me today that one family, one person found several siblings through DNA tests, and then they went on to find out that their mother had been married 3 times and had abandoned all her children. She had 8 children and had abandoned all of them, and they were finding each other through DNA tests. Amazing stuff. Tragic at the same time, but yeah, it's one that you may want to find out if you've got Irish. For instance, a lot of people watching this live stream would probably be interested in finding out, have I got Irish descent? Great. But be careful what else you might find out, you know. I'm seeing some repeat comments here, which always happens. Jim Shine. Men getting their Y chromosome reveals interesting things. I have distant DNA relatives in Spain through my Irish line. There you go, Jim. Erica is in the house. Beautiful that we're all just citizens of this world. Exactly. I think I read recently in a book by Owen Neeson that Caspian Sea is mentioned in Celtic myth. Is that so? Probably. Can I tell you exactly where? Not offhand. Monks were working off older manuscripts, but also lore from local people around the land. Of course, a lot of what was written down was the oral lore of the time, as preserved by the bards. Anyway, let's get on to the next headline, which is, as I said, it reads, Ancient Britons built Stonehenge, then disappeared, or vanished. Is science closing in on their killers? And as I said, we could easily change. Ancient Irish people built Newgrange, then disappeared. So this is written obviously for a British audience, but because the people who built the Neolithic monuments of Britain and Ireland were probably part of the same wider community, you know, we're talking about the same thing. I was amazed to find out that siblings have different DNA, says Alwyn. 2 weeks ago, and this article was published in The Guardian, on The Guardian online. Can I give you the link? We'll give it to you at the end. It was published on the 19th of June, so this day last week. 2 weeks ago, Pooja Swally from the Crick Institute announced the discovery of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that causes plague, in the dental pulp of 3 people who died about 4,000 years ago, 2 in Somerset, and the other in Cumbria. I'm probably butchering the way that people of Somerset say Somerset. Polymathing is in the house, just finishing work and looking forward to the second half. Thou dear bard, Anthony, thank you very much. Polymathing, you're very, very welcome to the stream. And yes, indeed, we are just beginning our exploration of what happened to the Neolithic people, having already heard that the Irish language probably arrived here with the Bronze Age. Fascinating stuff, I think you'll agree. This finding is astonishing in its own right because it pushes back the earliest evidence of plague in England by several millennia. But the discovery may also help to solve one of our greatest prehistoric mysteries. Why did the people who introduced farming to the British Isles suddenly vanish shortly after they built Stonehenge some 5 millennia ago? So, just before we get really stuck in on this, just to say we're talking about the same culture. So, we could easily interchange some other words into that sentence. Why did the people who introduced farming to Ireland suddenly vanish shortly after they built Newgrange, which is exactly what happened? Derek Hollingsworth is saying hi, Tom Janach, but better late. Yeah, no Brown Zone either, Derek. Everybody has reason to be late or to miss. And as we always say, you're very welcome one way or the other. And all of these streams are recorded, so they're available afterwards to watch back. Before last month's announcement of Yersinia pestis, the oldest evidence of plague in Britain came from a 1500-year-old skeleton interred at an Anglo-Saxon burial site near Cambridge. That victim died during the plague of Justinian. Now, we mentioned the Justinian plague on a recent episode when we were talking about the. I was referring to a recent blog post which was based on the work of Mike Bailey, which is related to dendrochronology, which revealed several catastrophes, climate events that had happened in Irish history. And the one centered on 540 AD is the one that coincides with the Justinian plague. So just in case you want to go over that or you hadn't seen that episode, I'm pasting the link into the blog post there. Please read it at your leisure after we're finished. That victim died during the plague of Justinian, which spread throughout the Eastern Roman Empire and beyond in the middle of the 6th century. While scientists have identified plague DNA in human remains across Europe and Asia dating to between 5,000 and 2,500 years ago, until last week, we couldn't be sure that this prehistoric pandemic reached these isles. It's now clear that it did. We know that more recent plague pandemics have affected societies in ways that are still evident. The Black Death, which killed more than half the British population in the mid-14th century, triggered a struggle between lords and serfs that led to the collapse of feudalism and the emergence of capitalism. 800 years earlier, the plague of Justinian had halted the Eastern Roman Empire's efforts to reconquer its lost western provinces. Eventually, the nation-states of Western Europe emerged from this political vacuum. And I think that's a theme touched upon by Thomas Cahill in his book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. We did an episode about that, and this may touch on some of the themes. Excuse me. Just give me a second to see if I can find that episode. Yes, indeed. That was episode number 2 of a series that I did 2 to 3 years ago called Book Talk. I'm going to paste the link in there. So if you want to watch that again afterwards, and that, as I say, will touch on some of the themes that we're discussing here. Similarly, it is likely that the consequences of the prehistoric plague that killed Britons in Somerset and Cumbria were so profound that they can still be seen and heard today. Ulla Conrad is joining from Denmark. Sorry, late, no problem at all. No Brown Zone, as I say. Before I continue, I'm going to turn on some lights. It's rather dark in the library now as the sun goes down. Give me one moment. And Anthony said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and it was good. Where Britons are really from is a complicated story. And again, where we see Britons, we can include the Irish Neolithic people in that. The oldest complete human skeleton found in the British Isles belongs to a 10,000-year-old Cheddar man. When scientists extracted and analysed his DNA a few years ago, they realised that he wasn't apologies, too much sun today, too much fresh air. They realised that he wasn't your stereotypical fair-haired pale-skinned English rose. Cheddar Man had dark brown skin, black hair, and blue-green eyes. He wasn't an anomaly. This is how the first Britons looked. Now, I'm just going to say right now here at this moment in time, if you're watching this later, the Mythical Ireland community and the people who watch these live streams are all very worldly people, and they're all pretty mature. If anything in this is triggering you, please do not inundate the Mythical Ireland social media with racist comments and all sorts of stuff, right? I'm just putting that warning out there now. Not interested. We don't tolerate it, okay? Go somewhere else with your bile, because this has happened before. As soon as you mention dark skin and prehistory in Ireland and in Britain, all sorts of nasty people come out of the woodwork. So the warning is here right now. Don't bother with it. If you comment and you make racist remarks or anything that is anti-science and anti all the rest, I will just delete. Right? So don't even bother, is what I'm saying. About 6,000 years ago, and it's not that the subject isn't up for debate, it's just that we're well able to have a debate once we're talking about the evidence. But a lot of this commentary in the past hasn't been based on any evidence or any science at all. It's just purely been racist. That's what it has been. Anyway, let's move swiftly on, shall we? About 6,000 years ago, Cheddar Man's foraging kinfolk were replaced by an olive-skinned, dark-haired population who originated in modern-day Turkey. Of course, this is what we spoke about in the first half, about that Neolithic farming people who had originated in Anatolia and migrated slowly across Europe, bringing agriculture with them. They would have looked similar to modern-day Southern Europeans, who have inherited a large portion of their DNA from these Neolithic farmers. And of course, as we've said in previous episodes, the closest cognates to those Neolithic people are the modern day population of the island of Sardinia, a place I haven't been. And if you're ever there, you can have a look, you know. Kathy May Deo has joined us on her lunch break. Hello, Kathy May. Good afternoon to you. Welcome, welcome. Irish technical thinker, in a typical dad joke, is talking about Cheddar Man and is asking, was he mature? Yes. Not far from Bristol, says Mavanway. Cheddar Gorge. Yes, indeed. Yes. Mavanway says, I lived in Sardinia for 2 years in my 20s. Wow, fantastic stuff. Are the Anatolians Fomorians, I wonder? Great chat as always. Yeah, there's a lot of people seem to make that connection between the Fomorians. No, not the Fomorians, the Fervulug, isn't it? See, the Fomorians, I think, were always here. They weren't one of the arrivals in mythology. The Fervulug, I think people have suggested, may have been the ones who brought agriculture. Yes. I'm just catching up here. They would have looked similar to modern. Yes. We can even hazard an educated guess as to what language they spoke. As the Basque people have a high proportion of Neolithic farmer ancestry, and their language is not related to any other, Euskara is likely to be the last surviving descendant of this prehistoric tongue. Euskara. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Let's see if Euskara, according to Oxford Dictionary pronunciation on Google. Euskara. Euskara is likely to be the last surviving descendant of this prehistoric tongue. It was these Anatolian immigrants who constructed that icon of Britishness, Stonehenge, between about 5,000 and 4,500 years ago. And let us just add this, as we have been doing, it was these Anatolian immigrants who constructed that great monument. And of course, a lot of the monuments of that era, Newgrange and Nouth and Douth and Loughcrew and Carrowmore and Carrowkeel and Poulnabrone, etc. But not long afterwards, they vanished and were replaced by another genetically distinct population group who were taller and fairer. Of course, we've had this discussion already in the previous article, the Beaker people. The newcomers were nomadic pastoralists from the Eurasian steppe, or the Pontic steppe, where they used cutting-edge technology, horses and wagons, to raise herds of animals. Now, I'm wondering now, I am wondering about the horse. Am I wrong about the horse being introduced in the Neolithic? Was it introduced in the Bronze Age? I need to do more research on that. I have a feeling the horse was first introduced in Ireland in the Neolithic. So they used horses and wagons to raise herds of animals. About 5,000 years ago, these steppe herders began to migrate westwards through northern Europe, reaching Britain and Ireland half a millennium later. So around 4,500 years ago, which is that horizon, which is not defined by a specific date or decade. Sometime in, around 2500 BC, give or take a couple of centuries. That is the horizon between Neolithic, late Neolithic, and early Bronze Age. Landed in Virginia, Anthony. That's Mariana Dunn. Brilliant stuff. I led Mariana and Cindy on a tour of the murals in Drogheda on Saturday, and she's back home in Virginia. Well, I'm glad to hear that you got home safely. I'm not expecting you with your jet lag to watch the whole episode. Very good of you to say hello. Wonderful to meet you for the first time. Sorry, Mariana. I also picked up on the correct pronunciation while you were here. But Mariana is one of, and has been for a long time, one of the Mythical Ireland community, and one of the people who has watched the live streams from the beginning of the pandemic, and is a patron as well. And such a wonderful pleasure to meet you and to tell you the stories of the mythological murals. Sheila Gunn has to leave. So interesting. We'll give my DNA info if we have an interest in the group. Sheila, it's been a pleasure. And don't forget to catch up on the last bit. We'll be finishing soon enough. I think we're coming up on an hour and 22 minutes. 92 people watching. A lot of people very interested in this subject. The Amesbury Archer was one of the new immigrants. His 4,300-year-old grave was discovered by archaeologists at a site slated for a new housing scheme a couple of miles from Stonehenge in 2002. Violence may have played a role in the replacement of the Stonehenge builders from Anatolia. 90% of the steppe herders involved in the Great Westward Migration were males, and domesticated horses and metal weapons would have provided them with a distinct advantage in conflict. So it would seem that the horse came in the Bronze Age, not in the Neolithic. I must do more reading. But even taking all this into account, it is almost impossible to explain how a small group of nomadic herders was able to replace a large, well-established farming society. Don't forget that that society was hierarchical. We see that at Bóinne, where giant monuments were built. Nobody can build a complex of giant monuments unless, first of all, they have a relatively complex language, and unless they have some sort of hierarchical structure. You don't just stumble into a field and drag a load of stones there, and create something that magnificent. Somebody was in charge. There was a tiered society, and it's looking even more likely now from the DNA that there was some sort of dynastic elite ruling caste, as it were. And of course, where there are rulers and a ruling elite, there are the ordinary workers and the different stratifications of society. The US geneticist David Reich suggests that the most similar historical parallel is the European colonization of the Americas in the 16th century. Tiny numbers of Spanish conquistadors, armed with guns and steel, managed to vanquish vast and sophisticated empires. These seemingly miraculous victories were, of course, only possible because old world germs, first smallpox, then others, raced ahead of the Spanish and devastated the enemy. Something I suggested in, I think it was my Newgrange book, and possibly also in my Mythical Ireland book. I have been asking the question for a long time, what happened to the Neolithic people, and suggested that there was possibly one or other or another, but possibly a combination. One was possible degradation of the climate and the weather. One was the introduction of a pathogen or a virus, and the other was war and conflict with the newcomers. Maybe it was a combination of things. Anyway, I think we're getting closer to maybe an answer, a more definitive answer here. Similarly, it is possible that a prehistoric plague pandemic cleared the way for the steppe herders to migrate across northern Europe. Evidence points to a catastrophic demographic crash about 5,000 years ago. The population fell by as much as 60%. Wow. I'm just highlighting this. And remained at that level for centuries. We can't be sure that plague was responsible, but it is the best explanation we currently have. Now, don't forget that tied into this discussion is back to our article about Mike Bailey and dendrochronology, the first of a series of 6 devastating climate events recorded. The last, remember, was the event centered on 540 AD, coinciding with the Justinian plague, and in the Irish annals, the failure of bread. The first of that series of 6 events occurs in, 3195 BCE. Right at the time we're told that NG10 was being buried at Newgrange. So perhaps this combination of climate event, major volcanic eruptions, casting a cloud of dust into the atmosphere, causing the sun's light and heat to be dissipated and reduced, causing the growth of trees and plants and, of course, everything that we eat to slow down or stop altogether. That comes alongside that comes plague, that just sets the scene for plague to flourish. The implications of all this are extraordinary. Now, they don't say in this Guardian article, they don't mention Mike Bailey's evidence of a catastrophic environmental event in 3195 BC. I'm introducing it because I think it's hardly coincidental to the story. The implications of all this are extraordinary. The new migrants brought the latest technology, not just horses and wagons, but also Beaker pottery and metal tools that marked the end of the Neolithic and the start of the Bronze Age. But their impact is much longer lasting. Although immigrants have continued to enrich the gene pool in the intervening years, the influx of steppe herders in the 3rd millennium BC was the last transformative movement of people into Europe. Their DNA is the largest source of ancestry in Northern Europe, accounting for slightly less than half of the genome of the British Isles. Wow. And we see the percentages are higher again in Ireland and higher again in Donegal. Steppe herders are also the most likely source of Indo-European languages, which includes English, but also German, French, Spanish, Greek, Russian, Farsi, and Hindi, spoken by about half of the world's population. In the distant past, Proto-Indo-European was spoken by a small group of people who then spread out across Europe and Central and South Asia, taking their language with them. All Indo-European languages share similar vocabulary, including words related to wagons. Steppe herders introduced wagons to Europe, and their DNA is found in significant proportions among people who speak Indo-European languages. So we're not just saying that by coincidence there was an invasion or an arrival, and by coincidence Irish might have arrived, right? What we're saying here is that the DNA of the steppe herders is found in significant proportion among people who speak Indo-European languages. Hardly a coincidence. All this should be a reality check for notions of where people are really from, and really is in quotes, and how we measure who is entitled to settle where in the world. The white British population are certainly not the indigenous people of the British Isles. And again, we could replace words in that sentence. The white Irish population are certainly not the indigenous people of Ireland, not from a genetic standpoint by any means. They are the descendants of immigrants who arrived on boats. And it is likely that they were only able to settle here because the humble Yersinia pestis bacterium cleared the way for them. Absolutely fascinating stuff, I think you'll agree. The science, again, is there. The detail is there. The response to that in some parts will be quite negative. But we, at some point, must realize that as human beings, in the words of JFK, we all share this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. At the end of the day, none of us gets to say you can or you can't go here or go there, or at least that shouldn't be the way it is. Whew. Cyb says, wonderful. Michael says, pride, heart, rainbow, Philly. Or maybe that was an emoji that didn't translate. Barbara Murphy says, nice. Kathy May says, yes. Yeah, and in answer to people who get racist about all this stuff, Marcus says, we're the foreigners, FFS. Yes, indeed. We're all foreigners, aren't we? If you go back far enough, our ancestors are on boats coming across the water. And famine and plague follow, says Desira. Yes, so we have, the possible correlation of a very major climate event, which absolutely happened. Because, folks, this stuff is in the tree ring record. If you listened to our live conversation episode with Mike Bailey, the dendrochronologist from Queen's University, Belfast, Mike had told us about how an entire history of Ireland, stretching back to about, was it about 5,000 BC, around 7,000 years ago, or more, wasn't it? 7,400 years, something like that, has been built up by comparing the tree rings of Irish bog oaks, and they've built up an entire chronology. And a lot of that has been backed up by the ice cores that are being taken out of the glaciers and the ice fields in Greenland, I think it was, wasn't it? Or was it Scandinavia? I think it was Greenland. So they're seeing the same sort of fairly significant events in the Irish tree rings mirrored in the ice cores. So that is pretty much indisputable at this stage. There was a major darkening event. Interesting when you consider the story of Douth and the fact that there was a famine, a murrain on the cattle of Ireland, such that there was only one bull and 7 cows left, and that all the men of Ireland were brought to bring Douth at this time. A plague or an epidemic. It's there in the mythology. And they were asked for Endless Day to build a monument, and they were granted that. But then, because of the king and his sister committing incest, there's the incest relating to the other science, a sudden darkness came upon the place and the men left. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for this, says Adrian. Very glad. Yeah, I felt that it would make a very interesting live stream, and I think it's been fascinating, and it adds to my knowledge. I hope it's added to yours somehow. And it brings us all closer to an extent, Marianne says, thank you. A true honour to have experienced Drogheda and the fabulous murals. Brilliant stuff. Yes, indeed. My pleasure and an honour. Cormac McCarthy passed away last week, says Irish technical thinker who's Marcus. The author who wrote No Country for Old Men and Blood Meridian. Believe he was 89, but wrote the best American Western books in history. Sad to hear of his passing. I think he wrote a lot of his stuff on mechanical typewriters back in the day, which I'm a big fan of, as you'll probably know. Evidence that Stonehenge was built in Wales first. Yes, indeed. The Pressley Hills and the Bluestones and all of that. Dennis Dwyer missed most of this, but I'll catch up now when you finish. Yeah, and as I said to anybody who's arriving late or who's missing this, don't forget it's on instant available replay as soon as we finish. Burr Whelan almost missed us. Yes, indeed. Coming in towards the end, but no problem. Burr, you're very welcome to the live stream as always. Polymathing says, I have lineage from Sardinia, settled in northern Italy, but have many Greek names tied to that line, combined with my father's Celtic DNA to make my crazy self. Yes, you said that, not me. Well, I just said what you were saying. Yeah, so interesting. Yes, Sheila had said, I think may have said that earlier. Would give my DNA info if we had an interest in the group. I have to leave. Thank you. Yes, we did indeed say that earlier. Sheila had to leave early. That's no problem at all. Alicia, is it Fradsham says, thank you. This validated so much for me. Yeah, and I just think that it's not that I think, it's obvious that the science of genetics is showing us so much about the past now that is so fascinating. It's really, really amazing. And I think it teaches us something about ourselves too. We have these notions about ourselves. So we get all these racial notions, you know, and it's silly at the end of the day. We're all breathing the same air, folks. We either live together and learn to live with each other, or else just repeating history all over again. All those major conflicts of the past. It's gotten very dull here, to the extent that I'm thinking, is it going to rain? Looking at the rainfall radar, oh, there's no rain in the vicinity. Just gotten very cloudy. Good session. Thanks, Anthony, says Barbara, for a nice conversation. Be safe and happy, everyone. Have a good week. You too, Barbara. My last week as a full-time journalist after 29 years on Friday. I am no longer a full-time journalist. I'm a full-time Mythical Irelander. Derek is gone back to earlier in the episode as I started late. Love learning about that language. Guramaga. No problem, Derek. My great pleasure. Ikawa Akarja. August Tufain, Adrian. Until next time. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. Don't forget, please, if you want to support, of course, now that I am running Mythical Ireland as a full-time enterprise, you may wish to support Mythical Ireland by becoming a patron. It's easy to do, and you can pledge as little as $1 a month, but the more you give, the more you get, as it were. And I am upping my game there as I migrate from full-time journalist to full-time Mythical Irelander. There'll be much more of that coming your way soon. And don't forget to keep an eye on the tours page of the website. Upcoming dates for Fornox, Tara, and Douth will be announced shortly. Congrats on your developing career, says Michael. Yeah. It'll be interesting to look back on, you know, was that a good decision, Anthony? Of course, I think the answer will be yes, but who knows? Thanks, Anthony. Hello, Paul. Paul and I, of course, have another common interest, which is aviation. And Paul and I are chatting regularly during the week. Adina, interesting how science is now validating what was passed down by stories. Yeah, I agree. Brilliant episode, says Alwyn. Glad you enjoyed it. And Guramaga, thank you, Alwyn, for joining us. Ola Conrad says yes. Connie Reader says, congrats on your new gig. I support that effort. Brilliant stuff. Yes, indeed. And more books in the offing. Which is the main one of the big reasons that I've decided to step away from my full-time journalism career is I just haven't had any time to write. I have several books that I need to get written. I have 2 more monographs that I want to write in the next while. So watch this space. Sean Potter says, great show. Never mind the Bronze Age. If you can trace your family tree back 6 or 7 generations, you'll find a Viking or Norman surname. No one is 100% Irish. Yeah, that's true. And of course, the other difficulty is that if you're using traditional genealogy, of course, the records just vanish into thin air because a lot of our descendants, a lot of our ancestors didn't read or write. And the only written records were the ones kept by the church. Have a great week all, says Mavanwe. It's been so interesting, hoping to come on one of those tours. I'll see if I can organise myself to cross the sea later in the summer. Ikawa, dear Tua, and have a wonderful week. Well, the same right back at you, Mavanwe. Have a great week, and thank you for your best wishes. And we'll see you, if not between now and then, we'll see you next Monday for the next instalment, which will either be a reading from Charles Squire, or maybe I'll find something else to talk about, because these departures from the script seem to go down very well. We'll get all my clients at the Ireland trip. We'll get all my clients at the Ireland trip. Bring to that page and to donate. Brilliant stuff, Monica. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much for your help and support. Much appreciated. Brendan Byrne is saying goodnight from Glendalough in the county of Wicklow, a most beautiful part of Ireland. Mariana says, thank you, Anthony. And get some sleep. don't get. I hope the jet lag isn't too bad, and great to see you at last, and to have added another name to the community that I've actually met in person. I recommend reading Stephen King on writing, his book on how to improve your writing, etc. Brilliant book, brilliant stuff, Marcus. Thank you. And as you know, still haven't finished it, by the way. I just stopped reading it because I was just too tired. I must read the last 100 or 200 pages. Yes, I've discovered surprises in my DNA, says Kathy May, as I think everybody would when they do it, But there you go. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll see you this time next week. Don't forget that I have an inclination to do occasional impromptu live streams. As I say, because I'm going to be doing Mythical Ireland full time from next week on, I'll probably be doing more live streams from out in the landscape. And don't forget occasional quizzes like the one today. Where was I? Caldwell May. Turns out I was at the West Cross in Kells in County Meath. 26 degrees Celsius in my room. Now, how should I sleep, says Monica. Get a big fan. If you haven't got air conditioning, a big fan will do the job. Read The Stand, says Brendan. I must do that when I get time. Yes. It is a hard book to complete. Yeah, but I was really enjoying it. I was just sitting working all day at a computer and then trying to do other Mythical Ireland stuff at the computer. And it was in the winter time. Now that it's the summer, I'm getting out and about much more, which is great. Full time, says Deborah Gilbert. Yay! I know, right? Exciting. And as I say, a bit daunting, but we'll try and make it happen. We will make it. We absolutely together will make it happen. Good night, folks. Have a great afternoon, morning / afternoon / evening / night, depending on where you are in the world. It's been my pleasure, as always, and delighted to be able to continue this wonderful exploration of the rich past of Ireland and, of course, its neighbouring countries, which continues to fascinate and enthrall. Joseph O'Hirda says, good night, Lat Anthony. Looking forward to doing one of your tours. Brilliant, Joseph. Looking forward to welcoming you to one of those tours. Kibble Hain says, great stuff. Good night, all. Thank you, and good night also. Michael Trott, who is in New Zealand, I believe. Michael, good morning to you. Thank you for your best wishes. I'm not sure if we had said hello earlier on. I didn't think so. Good night to all of you, says Monica. Polly Mathing has now just followed on Facebook. Brilliant stuff. And don't forget the Mythical Ireland community, as well as the main Mythical Ireland page on Facebook. Thank you for this, says Margaret. My pleasure, Margaret. No problem whatsoever. Good luck, says Alwyn. Thank you. The 4-leaf clover. I found 2 of those outside the Mound of the Hostages on different locations. I don't know if I told you that before. On 2 separate occasions, I have found 4-leaf clovers outside the Mound of the Hostages of Tara. Amadeus barked at Coda since he didn't bark. Yeah, do you know what it is? The girls are doing a bit of a tidy up in the room upstairs, and he's upstairs. That's why he's not barking tonight. He's upstairs tonight. Alva, or is it Alva? I think it's Alva. Says, take care, everyone. Good night to you all. So thank you for joining us. Slán go fóill. Agus I more, says Marcus. Would love live streams from out in the sacred countryside. Yes. Keep an eye, especially on the main Mythical Ireland Facebook page, where I tend to do. I don't have the streaming software set up to do both YouTube and Facebook, so I tend to do Facebook when I'm out in the landscape. Brendan Byrne says your success is insured. Thank you, Brendan. I hope so. Kathleen Gallagher is saying great episode. Kelly Nikali says, Sláinte. Hello, Kelly. I'm not sure if I don't think we'd said hello earlier on. Hello and goodbye all in one. Unfortunately, as we have reached the end of the episode, Kathleen Gallagher, thank you, and good night indeed to you also. In the community now too. Thank you, says Polly Mathing. Brilliant stuff. Okay, good night. Thank you for joining us. All that remains for me to say is Ikawa, Kulusov, Slán go fóill, and most importantly, thank you, Michael, Toga Bugay, which is take it easy. Have fun.